You never know who's watching. That was the thought Emily Thompson had every morning as she walked into the diner, ready for another long shift. The same faces greeted her daily, the same regulars, the same quiet hum of the coffee machine. But today, something felt different. The air was thick with anticipation. Her eyes darted to the window. Nothing out of the ordinary, just the usual bustle of the town's main street. But inside, something was shifting. For the past 6 months, Emily had served James, the old man who sat at the same corner table every morning. He never said much, just ordered his usual black coffee and a slice of toast, a quiet figure in the corner of the diner. Emily had always felt a pull toward him, something unspoken. She saw how lonely he looked, his thin, wrinkled hands shaking slightly as he lifted his cup to his lips. It wasn't much, but Emily began bringing him an extra slice of bread, just enough to show she cared. She knew he didn't have much. His clothes were old and worn, and he rarely spoke about his life. Still, Emily couldn't help but wonder if he was hiding something. Every morning, she slid the extra bread onto his plate, making sure it was always warm. She never expected anything in return. In fact, she never even thought about it. It was just her way of showing kindness to someone who seemed to have nothing left. But today, something felt off. As Emily walked toward the counter to grab another coffee pot, she noticed James hadn't touched his toast. His hand trembled, and his eyes were fixed on the door. She walked over, concern creeping into her chest. "James, you okay?" she asked, her voice soft. He looked up at her, his eyes wide, as if seeing her for the first time. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice hoarse. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She took a step back, unsure of what he was going to say. "What is it?" she asked. His eyes shifted to the window, then back to her. "You've been so kind to me, Emily. But you have no idea who I really am." Her brows furrowed, and she tilted her head. "What do you mean?" James leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "I'm not just some old man sitting here alone. Every day, well, let's just say, I'm someone who can change your life in an instant." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. What was he talking about? She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, the diner door swung open with a soft chime. Emily turned, her eyes locking with the group of men who had just walked in. 10 black SUVs were parked outside, their tinted windows reflecting the overcast sky. Emily's heart raced. The men stepped inside, their polished shoes clicking on the diner's tiled floor. They weren't like the regulars she was used to. They were clean-cut, sharp, and dressed in suits that screamed power. One of them, tall, with silver-gray hair and a commanding presence, moved toward her. Emily felt a wave of anxiety rise in her chest. Why were they here? What did they want? She looked back at James, who was now sitting upright, his eyes calm but with a hint of something, knowing. The man in the suit approached Emily and spoke with authority. "We need to speak to the owner," he said. Emily blinked, still trying to make sense of the situation. I'm the waitress here," she stammered. The man's gaze softened, but his tone remained firm. "Then you're the one we need." She didn't know what to say. All she could do was nod. Her mind raced, trying to put the pieces together. James was no ordinary old man. And now, these men were here for her. Whatever this was, Emily knew her life was about to change forever. The man in the suit stepped forward, his sharp gaze fixed on Emily. She could feel her heart racing as the room seemed to freeze around her. The clinking of cups, the soft murmur of conversation, everything fell away. Emily looked around the diner, her eyes searching for answers, but there were none to be found. James remained quiet, his expression unreadable, as if he knew exactly what was unfolding. The men in suits took seats at the booth closest to the counter, their eyes never leaving Emily. Her mind raced, trying to process everything that was happening. Who were these people? What did they want from her? Her hands trembled slightly as she set the coffee pot down, the faint sound of the liquid filling the cup barely breaking the silence. The man in the suit cleared his throat, drawing Emily's attention back to him. "We've been following you," he said calmly, his voice smooth and authoritative. "Your kindness, the way you've been looking after James, it hasn't gone unnoticed." Emily blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man's lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "James isn't just some old man. He's been under our watch for quite some time now. And so have you." Emily's stomach tightened. Her thoughts were spinning. Why me? She managed to ask, her voice shaky. The man's eyes softened for a moment, before he continued. You see, Emily, you've done something very few people would even consider doing. You've shown compassion to someone who everyone else overlooked. And for that, we are here. He paused, allowing his words to sink in. Emily tried to steady her breathing. This couldn't be real. She had just been helping out, doing what she thought was right. But now, with this man and his companions sitting before her, everything was changing. What do you want from me? Emily asked, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. The man studied her for a moment, his expression hardening. We've been keeping an eye on this diner for a while. James, well, he's a very important person. His actions have caused a ripple effect. And you, Emily, you're part of that effect. Her head was spinning, but she could sense that this wasn't a threat. It was something else. You've given us a reason to help, the man added, leaning forward slightly. We're here to offer you a chance, an opportunity. Something more than this diner. Something far bigger. Emily's mind was a blur. Her gaze drifted back to James, still seated at his corner table. He wasn't looking at her anymore, his gaze focused on the window, lost in his own thoughts. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Was he in on this? Had he known all along? The man in the suit's voice broke through her thoughts. There's a world beyond what you see, Emily. A world where your kindness, your actions, will make a difference. We can offer you a place in that world. The room was silent, and all Emily could hear was the pounding of her own heart. She was overwhelmed. This was beyond anything she had imagined. Was this really happening? She didn't know how to respond, but before she could say anything, the door to the diner opened again. This time, it wasn't just any customer. A sleek black car pulled up outside, and another figure stepped out, tall, elegant, with an air of power that made the diner feel even smaller. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Who was this new person? She turned to the man in the suit, but he was already standing, gesturing toward the door. This is the beginning, Emily, he said, his tone final. We'll be in touch. He walked toward the door, leaving Emily standing frozen in place, her mind still struggling to grasp the magnitude of what had just transpired. James slowly turned his head, meeting her gaze for the first time that day. His expression was soft, almost apologetic. You've done more than you know, he whispered, as if speaking to himself more than to her. Emily stood there for a moment longer, unsure of what her next move would be. She had helped a man in need, but now, it seemed as though that simple act of kindness had opened a door to a world she wasn't ready for. A world where power, influence, and secrets intertwined in ways she could never have imagined. The atmosphere in the diner was thick with tension as Emily stood frozen, still processing the events of the last few moments. She felt the weight of the man's words pressing down on her, the promise of something bigger, something beyond her wildest dreams. But as the sleek black car pulled away, leaving behind only the faint smell of expensive leather and gasoline, she was left with more questions than answers. The diner's usual hum was gone, replaced by an eerie silence. The men in suits had disappeared as quickly as they arrived, but their presence lingered in the air, like a shadow she couldn't shake. Emily's hands trembled as she wiped down the counter, her thoughts racing. What had she just stepped into? Was she really ready for this world they were offering her? Emily, you okay? A voice broke through her thoughts. She turned to see Linda, the cook, standing at the kitchen door, her apron covered in flour. Linda's face was a mix of concern and curiosity, and Emily could tell that she had been watching the entire scene unfold. Emily forced a smile, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in her chest. Yeah, I'm fine. Just a little overwhelmed, I guess, she said, her voice sounding foreign even to her own ears. Linda raised an eyebrow, stepping closer. Overwhelmed? By those guys? They were intense, huh? Emily nodded, her mind still on the man's words. They weren't exactly what I was expecting. And then James, she trailed off, looking back at the old man sitting in his usual corner. Do you know what's going on, Linda? Was he involved in all of this? Linda hesitated for a moment before speaking, her eyes darting toward James. I don't know much, Emily, but James has been coming here for years. No one really knows where he's from or what he does, but I've always had a feeling there's more to him than meets the eye. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had always sensed there was something different about James, but now, With the mysterious men in suits and the black SUVs, she wasn't so sure. You think he's involved with them? Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Linda shrugged, her face unreadable. I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was. He's not just some old man, Emily. I've seen him do things, say things, that I can't explain. He's been a part of something bigger, I'm sure of it. Emily felt a knot form in her stomach. She had never thought of James in that way. He was just the quiet man who sat in the corner, keeping to himself. But now, everything had changed. The diner, the life she had known, seemed to be crumbling around her. What do I do now? She asked, more to herself than to Linda. Linda gave her a sympathetic look, placing a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to decide anything right now. But if I were you, I'd keep my eyes open. This is bigger than us, Emily. Emily nodded, taking in Linda's words. She turned to glance at James once more, her mind racing with possibilities. What had she just gotten herself into? And more importantly, what did James know that she didn't? The rest of the day passed in a blur. Emily went through the motions, serving the usual customers, but her mind was elsewhere. She couldn't stop thinking about the man in the suit, the offer he had made, and the possibility that James, the quiet old man she had been serving for months, was somehow connected to it all. As the diner began to empty out and the last of the evening light slipped through the window, Emily felt a strange sense of finality wash over her. She was standing on the edge of something unknown, and she had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went. But she knew one thing for sure. Her life would never be the same again. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. The quiet diner, the familiar rhythm of the day, all of it seemed like a distant memory now. As the evening shifted into night, Emily wiped down the counter once more, her hands moving mechanically. Her mind wasn't on the dishes or the few remaining customers. It was on the words that had been said earlier. The man in the suit, the black SUVs, James. Everything had collided in that moment, and she still couldn't make sense of it. After the last customer left, Emily found herself staring at the door, lost in thought. She thought back to the days before all of this, back when the diner was just a place where she worked, where she spent her days serving coffee and chatting with the regulars. But now, it felt different. She glanced over at James, who was still sitting in his usual spot, his face unreadable as he watched the rain fall outside. There was something about him, something hidden just beneath the surface. She had always thought he was just a quiet old man, but now she wasn't so sure. James had always been a mystery, but after today, he felt like a key to a door she wasn't sure she wanted to open. Emily's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the bell above the door. She turned to see a figure step inside, but it wasn't someone she recognized. The man was tall, wearing a dark coat, his face obscured by the hood. He moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the diner before landing on Emily. He walked toward her, his footsteps steady, but not rushed. Emily felt a chill run down her spine as he approached. There was something about his presence that felt different from the usual late-night stragglers, who came in for a last cup of coffee. This man was here for a reason. You're Emily, right? His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, as if he already knew everything about her. She nodded slowly, not sure what to expect next. I'm here on behalf of someone who wishes to speak with you, he continued. Someone who has been watching you. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Who? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked over at James, who had not moved from his seat. Emily followed his gaze, but when she turned back, the man was already pulling a chair out and sitting down across from her. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. You've already met him, though he hasn't told you everything. Emily's stomach tightened. She glanced at James again, but he remained still, his eyes locked on the rain outside. James, Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. The man nodded. Yes, he's been part of something far bigger than you can imagine. And now, you're involved. The words hit her like a wave. She couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. Everything was happening so fast. Why me? She finally managed to ask, her voice shaking. The man's eyes softened for a moment, but his expression remained serious. Because you've shown kindness when no one else would. And now, that kindness has put you on a path that will change everything. Emily's mind raced, the weight of his words sinking in. She wasn't sure if she was ready for what was coming, but one thing was clear, there was no turning back now. The man stood up, straightening his coat. "We'll be in touch," he said before turning and walking out of the diner, leaving Emily to process everything that had just happened. She sat there in silence, the quiet hum of the diner now deafening in the stillness. What had she just gotten herself into? And what did James know that she didn't? She couldn't answer those questions yet, but she knew that the life she had known was over. The path ahead was unknown, but it was waiting for her, and there was no way to walk away from it now. Emily spent the next few days in a daze, caught between the ordinary world of her diner and the strange, uncharted world the man in the suit had hinted at. Each morning, she went through the motions, greeting the regulars, refilling coffee cups, and exchanging pleasantries with Linda, but her mind was elsewhere. Her thoughts constantly returned to that conversation, the cryptic words, the unsettling sense that she was now a part of something bigger than herself. It was hard to focus, hard to shake the feeling that she was being watched, though no one around her seemed to notice. James hadn't been in the diner since the day the man came. Emily couldn't shake the image of him, sitting quietly at his table, watching the rain through the window, as if waiting for something. Every time she thought of him, her heart skipped. Was he involved in all of this? Had he known what was coming? The more she thought about it, the more Emily realized she couldn't ignore the pull to find out more. She couldn't keep living in this uncertainty. So, one morning, as the sun began to rise and the diner was still empty, Emily made up her mind. She would find James. It had been a week since he'd last shown up, and the empty seat in his usual spot was beginning to feel like an unspoken void. The day had barely started when she stepped out of the diner, wrapping her scarf around her neck as she walked toward his apartment. It was a small, nondescript building on the edge of town, the kind of place where people blended in, unnoticed by the world. She had passed it countless times, but had never thought much of it, until now. As she stood in front of the building, she hesitated. She didn't know what she expected to find, but she felt an undeniable need to speak to him, to figure out if he had been part of this all along. Taking a deep breath, Emily pushed the door open and walked inside. The smell of stale coffee and old newspapers greeted her as she made her way down the narrow hallway to his apartment. She knocked softly, her heart beating a little faster than usual. After a moment, the door creaked open. There he was, James, looking just as he always did. His gray hair was slightly disheveled, his clothes simple but neat. He gave her a small, knowing smile. "Emily," he said, his voice soft but steady. "I knew you'd come." The words sent a chill through her. How did he know? She opened her mouth to speak, but the questions she had been holding in all week seemed to disappear. Instead, she found herself stepping inside, compelled by something she couldn't name. "I need to understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What is this? What's happening?" James closed the door behind her, and for a moment, there was silence. The kind of silence that held the weight of years of untold stories. He motioned for her to sit, and she did, her eyes never leaving his. "You've seen the signs," he said, his voice low. "You felt it too. The pull, the shift in the air. You're not just a waitress anymore, Emily. You're part of something bigger, something that has been set into motion long before you ever stepped into that diner." Emily's mind was racing. "Why me?" she asked, her voice trembling. James paused, his gaze softening. "Because you're more than just a kind soul, Emily. You have a strength inside you that you haven't even begun to understand. And now, you're part of a world that needs that strength. A world that is about to change." Emily felt a knot form in her stomach. She had wanted answers, but this was more than she had bargained for. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she said, shaking her head. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do." James reached out, placing a hand on hers. "You don't have to have all the answers right now, but know this, you're not alone. There are others, like you, who have been drawn into this world. And together, you will face what's coming." The weight of his words settled over her like a heavy blanket. She didn't know what was coming, but she could feel it now. The quiet before the storm, the calm before everything changed. She looked up at James, seeing him not just as the old man who had sat in her diner every day, but as something more, a guide, a mentor, perhaps even a protector. And in that moment, Emily knew her life was no longer her own. It had become something greater, something she couldn't walk away from, no matter how much she wanted to. The world around her was shifting, and she had no choice but to step forward into the unknown. Emily sat in the dimly lit apartment, the weight of James's words still lingering in the air. She had come here seeking answers, but what she had found was a world that felt both distant and dangerously close. James's words echoed in her mind, each one a puzzle piece she wasn't sure how to fit together. You're not alone. You're part of something bigger. The world he spoke of felt so foreign, so far removed from the quiet life she had known in the diner, yet everything inside her told her she was already deep into it. James seemed to notice the confusion in her eyes, the uncertainty that had taken root in her heart. Emily, you have a role to play in this. The path ahead won't be easy, but you can't turn back now. You've already stepped into it. He paused, his gaze steady. You can choose to ignore it, to walk away from it all, but deep down, you know you can't. It's bigger than all of us. Emily took a shaky breath, trying to grasp the enormity of it all. She had never asked for this. She had never imagined that a simple act of kindness would lead her to this moment. She had been content with her life before, the diner, the regulars, the small, familiar routine. But now, that world seemed so distant, like it was a lifetime ago. She glanced around James's apartment, the small space filled with old furniture and faded photographs. There was nothing extraordinary about it, nothing that screamed important. Yet, everything here felt tied to something she couldn't yet understand. What am I supposed to do? She asked quietly, her voice betraying the uncertainty she felt. James leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. You've already done the hardest part, Emily. You've opened your heart, and that's what they've been waiting for. Now, it's time to trust yourself. Trust the path ahead. Emily's heart raced. She wanted to believe him, to trust that everything would make sense eventually, but how could she? This wasn't just about helping James anymore. This was about something far larger, something that reached beyond the walls of this small apartment. She stood up slowly, pacing the small room, her mind racing. Who are these people? The men in suits, the ones who've been watching me? What do they want? James remained silent. For a moment, then sighed, his expression softening. They've been watching for years. They've seen your kindness, your strength. You're not the first, Emily. There have been others before you. People who were drawn into this world. People who had no idea what they were getting into. But it's not just about power. It's about something else, something that could change everything. Emily's mind raced, her thoughts colliding in a whirlwind of confusion and fear. What was he talking about? Was she really a part of something that could change the world? What's coming? She asked, her voice trembling. James stood up, walking over to the window. He didn't answer right away, his gaze focused on the city outside. The lights below twinkled in the distance, but it felt as if the world outside was still, waiting for something. Finally, he spoke. A storm is coming, Emily. A shift in the balance of power. What happens next will depend on you, and on the choices you make. It's not just about what's happening in the world around us. It's about what's happening inside of you. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Inside of me, she whispered. James nodded. You've always had it within you, Emily. The strength, the ability to make a difference. They've been waiting for someone like you. Emily didn't know what to say. The weight of his words was overwhelming, and yet, there was something inside her that stirred, something deep that told her she couldn't walk away. She had been drawn into this world for a reason, and no matter how much she wanted to turn back, she knew she couldn't. James turned to her, his eyes filled with quiet resolve. Whatever happens next, Emily, remember this, you are not alone, and you have the power to change everything. Emily stood there, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. Her life would never be the same. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was hers to walk, and she was ready to face whatever came next. The following week, Emily felt herself pulled deeper into the strange world she had found herself in. Every part of her life, the diner, the familiar faces of the regulars, the daily rhythm, seemed to grow more distant with each passing day. She tried to push it aside, to ignore the pull of the unknown, but it was no use. The feeling that something was coming, something big, grew stronger by the hour. The man in the suit had told her that a storm was coming, but what did that really mean? What was she supposed to do with that? She couldn't just sit back and wait, could she? It was a Saturday afternoon when it happened. The diner was quieter than usual, the lull between the lunchtime rush and the evening crowd. Emily wiped down the counter, her eyes drifting to the window, where the city sprawled out before her like a map she couldn't yet read. The bell above the door chimed, and she looked up to see a familiar face. Linda, the cook, was walking toward her, looking a little more serious than usual. "Hey, Emily," Linda said, her voice low. Emily turned to face her, noting the concerned expression on her friend's face. "What's going on?" "You need to know something," Linda said, her voice almost a whisper. "There's been talk. People around here, they're noticing things. Strange things. They're starting to ask questions." Emily felt a chill spread through her. "What kind of questions?" Linda looked around before leaning in closer. "About you. About James. They're wondering why you two are always so close. Why you've been different lately." Emily's heart raced. She hadn't realized how much her connection with James had drawn attention, but now that Linda mentioned it, she could see how it might look. She had been spending more time with him, asking him questions, trying to understand the world he had hinted at, the world she was beginning to feel drawn into. "What are they saying?" Emily asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Nothing specific, but you can feel the whispers. People are starting to wonder if there's more to you than you let on," Linda replied. Emily's mind raced. Had she made a mistake by getting involved? By asking questions? She looked toward James's usual spot, but he wasn't there. "Where's James?" Emily asked, her voice tense. Linda's face grew more serious. "He hasn't been around for a few days. No one's seen him, but I think he knows something's coming." Emily's stomach twisted. Was he in danger? Had he been involved in something bigger than she had realized? "What do you mean, he knows something's coming?" Linda hesitated for a moment before speaking again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Emily, I've known James for a long time. He's not just some old man. He's been involved with some people, important people. People who know things. Things that could change everything." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "What things?" she asked, her voice trembling. Linda shook her head. "I don't know everything. But I think you're in this too, whether you know it or not. You've got a part to play, and I think it's bigger than you think." The weight of Linda's words settled in her chest like a heavy stone. She had already known that something was different about James, but now it was clear this wasn't just about him. It was about her, too. She had been pulled into something that was far beyond the diner, beyond the small life she had known. The questions kept swirling in her mind, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't back out now. Not after everything she had learned. She had already crossed the threshold. But the deeper she went, the more she felt like she was being watched. Was it the people James had warned her about? Or was it the ones who had been watching from the shadows? The ones who had been waiting for her to make her move? The door to the diner opened again, and Emily's attention snapped back to the present. This time, it wasn't just anyone walking in. A tall figure, dressed in a dark suit, stepped inside. The same man from the first day, the one with the commanding presence, the one who had spoken to her in cryptic riddles. He looked directly at Emily, his eyes piercing, and a small, knowing smile crept across his face. "Emily," he said, his voice smooth and authoritative. "We need to talk." The man in the suit walked toward her, his presence filling the small diner like a wave crashing against the shore. Emily's heart was pounding in her chest. She had been waiting for this moment, for the conversation she had known was inevitable, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure if she was ready. The man's eyes locked onto hers, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk," he repeated, his tone even, but there was something in his voice that told Emily this wasn't a casual conversation. This was a meeting that would change everything. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "About what?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man didn't immediately respond. He simply took a seat across from her at the counter, his movements deliberate, measured. "About you, Emily," he said after a pause. "About your place in all of this." He gestured to the diner around them. "This isn't just a diner. This is where everything starts." Emily frowned, confusion clouding her mind. "What are you talking about?" The man's gaze softened for a moment, but only for a moment. "You've been chosen, Emily. Chosen for something far greater than you can understand right now. And the time to act is coming." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had heard those words before. Chosen, greater purpose. But they had always seemed like vague promises, the kind of things people said to make you feel special without actually explaining anything. But there was something in this man's voice, something about the way he looked at her, that made her believe him. "You're not alone," he continued, his voice steady. "There are others, people just like you. People who've been pulled into this. But you. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes intense. You're different. You've already shown them what they need to see. Emily's head was spinning. She couldn't keep up with the conversation. What was he talking about? What had she shown them? She had just been trying to get through her days, working at the diner, helping James. I don't understand, she said, her voice cracking. What do you mean? The man sighed, as if he had expected this confusion. You've seen the signs, Emily. The things that don't make sense. The things that are just out of reach. They've been watching you, testing you. And now, they're ready to bring you into the fold. To give you a choice. A choice. Emily repeated, her mind racing. What kind of choice? The man's lips curled into a faint smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. A choice between staying in your comfortable little life, in this diner, with the people who are content to ignore the bigger picture, or stepping into a world that needs someone like you. Someone who has the strength to do what needs to be done. Emily felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to react. She had spent so many years living a quiet, predictable life, and now this man was asking her to step into something she couldn't even comprehend. I don't know if I can, she whispered, more to herself than to him. I don't know if I'm ready for this. The man's expression softened, and for the first time, he seemed almost sympathetic. No one is ever ready, Emily. But the world doesn't wait for us to catch up. The choice is yours, but it won't be there forever. You have to decide. Emily's mind was reeling. The weight of his words was heavy, and she felt herself being pulled in two directions. On one side was the life she knew, the diner, the familiar faces, the comfort of routine. On the other side was the unknown, a world full of power, secrets, and a role she wasn't sure she could play. How do I even begin? She asked, her voice small. The man stood up, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the diner. You'll know when the time comes. Trust yourself. Trust what you've learned. And when the moment arrives, you'll make the right choice. He turned and began walking toward the door, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Emily watched him leave, her heart in turmoil. The man had come, given her the weight of the world in a few simple sentences, and then walked out, leaving her to figure it all out. She sat there, staring at the empty space where he had been, trying to make sense of everything. The choice was hers. But how could she choose when she didn't even understand what she was choosing between? Days passed, and Emily's mind remained a storm of confusion and fear. The words of the man in the suit echoed in her head at night, and during the day, they haunted her thoughts like a shadow she couldn't shake. The diner felt like a different world now. The clinking of dishes, the hum of the coffee machine, the familiar faces, all of it seemed to fade into the background, irrelevant in the face of the unknown future that lay ahead of her. She had tried to keep up with the motions of her life, serving coffee, chatting with the regulars, but each interaction felt hollow. Every time she glanced out the window, the world outside seemed to mock her. She couldn't go back. She couldn't pretend like nothing had changed. That night, she stood by the window in her apartment, staring out at the city lights below. Her fingers traced the edge of the windowsill, her thoughts consumed by the choice the man had given her. What did it all mean? What role was she supposed to play in this larger game? And why her? She didn't feel special. She wasn't anyone important. She had never been someone who stood out, who made a difference. But then again, maybe that was the point. Maybe that was why they had chosen her. She had never asked for any of this. She hadn't asked for power or purpose or whatever it was they were offering her. She had just been trying to do the right thing, helping James, showing kindness when no one else would. But now that simple kindness felt like a doorway she had stepped through without realizing the consequences. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. Emily's heart skipped. She wasn't expecting anyone. She walked over to the door, her pulse quickening, and opened it to find James standing in the hallway, his expression unreadable. His eyes softened when he saw her, but there was something in his gaze that felt heavier than usual. James, Emily said softly, surprised to see him. Where have you been? I haven't seen you in days. He stepped inside without a word, his worn shoes barely making a sound on the hardwood floor. I've been waiting for you to come to me, James said quietly, his voice heavy with something unspoken. Emily felt a lump form in her throat. Why didn't you say anything sooner? She asked, her voice trembling. James didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked over to the small table in her living room and sat down, motioning for her to join him. She did, taking a seat across from him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I didn't want to force your hand, Emily," he said finally, his eyes locking onto hers. "I've seen what's coming, and I knew you would have to come to this decision on your own. But it's time." "Time for what?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. James sighed, a deep, almost weary sound. "You've been chosen, Emily. There's no turning back now. You've felt it, haven't you? The weight of it, the feeling that everything is changing." Emily nodded, the words catching in her throat. "I don't know what to do," she admitted. "I don't know if I'm ready for this." James reached across the table, placing a gentle hand on hers. "You don't have to be ready. You just have to trust yourself. Trust that you're not alone in this. The choice is yours, but you're not making it by yourself. There are others, people who have been through what you're facing." His words were comforting, but they also left her with an unsettling feeling in the pit of her stomach. How could she be sure of any of this? How could she trust that this wasn't all some kind of trap? But then again, she realized, she already knew she couldn't go back. She couldn't undo the choices she had already made. She had already stepped into this world, whether she understood it or not. The question wasn't whether she was ready, it was whether she could face what was coming. James squeezed her hand gently. "You have the strength inside you, Emily. You always have. But you have to step into it. You have to choose who you want to be in this world." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She didn't know if she was ready to make that choice. But in that moment, she understood something that she hadn't before. The world was waiting, and she was going to have to face it head on. She took a deep breath and looked at James. "What now?" she asked, her voice steady for the first time in days. James smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "Now we prepare." Emily stood in her small apartment, her mind racing with the enormity of the decision ahead. The room felt too quiet, the walls pressing in on her as if they were trying to suffocate the uncertainty she couldn't escape. James's words echoed in her mind. Asterisk, "You have the strength inside you." Asterisk, how could that be true? She had always been just Emily, simple, steady Emily, who served coffee and made small talk with the regulars at the diner. Now, suddenly, she was being told she had a role to play in something much bigger than herself, and she wasn't sure she could live up to it. She couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. The choice had been made for her the moment she stepped into that world, and now there was no turning back. But what was she supposed to do next? "Trust yourself," James had said. It was hard to trust herself when she had no idea what was happening. The knock on her door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. She froze, her heart skipping a beat. It wasn't the sound she was used to, just a knock, not a chime like the ones at the diner. It was deliberate, the kind of knock that made her feel like someone was waiting for her. She moved slowly toward the door, her steps cautious, unsure of what to expect. She opened it, and there stood the man from the suits, the one who had been watching her from the very beginning. He had the same piercing eyes, the same calm demeanor. But this time, he didn't have that cold, calculating smile. Instead, his expression was serious, almost solemn. "Emily," he said, his voice low and steady. "It's time." Her stomach tightened. Time for what? She couldn't hide the apprehension in her voice. Time for what? The man stepped inside without waiting for her response, as if he had already known she would let him in. "Time for you to meet the others," he said, his eyes scanning the room, lingering for just a moment before meeting hers. "You've made your choice, whether you realize it or not." Emily's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. The others, who were these people? What did they want with her? She had never asked for any of this. The man stepped toward her, his movements smooth, calculated. "There are others like you, Emily, chosen in the same way, drawn into this world by the same forces. You're not alone in this, and now it's time for you to see the bigger picture." She swallowed hard, her throat dry. She had no idea what was happening, but she knew she couldn't back out now. She had already crossed the line, and there was no going back. The man gave her a brief, almost imperceptible smile. "Come with me," he said, his tone not a request but an order. Emily hesitated for just a moment, but then she realized she didn't have a choice. She couldn't stay here, stuck in her confusion. She had to take the next step. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice steady but unsure. "To meet the others," he said again, as if that explanation would somehow make everything clear. The man turned and walked toward the door, and Emily followed, her heart pounding with anticipation and dread. They walked down the hallway, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the silence. The air felt heavier, as if the world itself was holding its breath. When they reached the elevator, the man pressed the button for the top floor, and they stood in silence as the doors slid closed. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental was about to happen. The elevator began its ascent, the soft hum of the machinery filling the space between them. Emily glanced at the man, her curiosity piqued. Who are these people? The others. The man didn't look at her, but his voice was calm as he spoke. They're like you, people who've been chosen. Some of them are already aware of their roles, but others are still in the dark. You'll meet them soon enough. Emily's mind was racing. Chosen. It kept echoing in her head, but she still didn't understand what it meant. She had been just a waitress, and now she was being pulled into a world she didn't recognize, didn't understand. The elevator stopped with a soft chime, and the doors opened to reveal a sleek, modern lobby. The man let her out, and Emily's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just any building. It felt different. It felt important. She had no idea what she was about to walk into, but deep down, she knew she couldn't turn away now. This was it. The next chapter of her life was about to begin, and she had no idea where it would take her. The man led Emily down the long, sleek hallway, his footsteps echoing in the quiet building. The walls were lined with modern artwork, each piece seeming to tell a story of its own, though Emily couldn't focus on any of them. Her mind was too preoccupied with what was happening, what she was about to face. She had never imagined her life taking this turn. She had been just a simple waitress in a small diner, doing what she could to make it through each day. Now, here she was, following a stranger into the unknown, about to meet people who were part of a world she didn't even know existed. The man stopped in front of a large set of doors, the kind that would normally be found in a corporate building or a high-end hotel. He turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "This is it," he said, his voice calm. "The others are inside. They're waiting for you." Emily felt her heart race. This was it. The moment she had been dreading and anticipating all at once. She wasn't ready for any of this. She wasn't ready to meet these people, to be a part of whatever this world was. But there was no turning back now. The door slid open silently, and the man stepped aside, motioning for her to enter. Emily hesitated for a moment, her breath shallow, then stepped through the threshold. Inside, the room was large and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of the city below. A long, polished table sat in the center of the room, surrounded by several people. They all turned to look at her as she entered, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and something else, something she couldn't quite place. The man who had led her here walked toward the table and took a seat, gesturing for Emily to do the same. "This is Emily," he said to the others, his voice calm and authoritative. "She's the one we've been waiting for." Emily felt all eyes on her as she slowly made her way to the empty seat. She could feel the weight of their gazes, the pressure mounting as she sat down, unsure of what to say or do. The room fell silent for a moment, and then a woman seated at the far end of the table spoke. "So," she said, her voice smooth but sharp, "you're the one who's going to change everything." Emily looked at the woman, her heart pounding. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman smiled, a small, knowing smile that only added to the unease Emily was already feeling. "You'll find out soon enough," she said. "We all did." Another person, a man sitting beside the woman, leaned forward. "It's not just about what you can do," he said, his voice low and serious. "It's about who you are. You've already shown us what we needed to see." Emily's mind was spinning. What did they mean? What had she shown them? She had only been trying to do the right thing, to help where she could. She didn't feel special, didn't feel like she had any extraordinary abilities. She was just Emily. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her efforts to stay composed. The man who had led her here spoke again, his tone firm but not unkind. "We want you to be part of this," he said. "We need people who are willing to stand up, to make the hard choices. You've been chosen because you've already proven that you have the courage to do what others can't." Emily's stomach twisted. She didn't feel brave. She didn't feel special. She felt like she had been thrust into a world she didn't understand, surrounded by people who expected things from her that she wasn't sure she could give. "I don't know if I can do this," she said, her voice breaking. The woman at the far end of the table nodded slowly, as if she had been expecting this response. "None of us were sure when we started," she said. "But we did it. And so will you." Emily looked around at the faces of the people in the room. Each one seemed so sure of themselves, so confident in the roles they had been given. She felt small in comparison. She had never been someone who stood out, who made a difference. But now, she was being asked to do something she wasn't sure she was capable of. The man who had led her here stood up again. "The choice is yours, Emily," he said. "But know this, you're not alone. We're in this together." Emily took a deep breath, her mind still reeling, but something inside her shifted. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing. She couldn't back out now. She had already stepped into this world, and there was no going back. She had a choice to make, and whether she was ready or not, it was time to make it. Emily sat quietly at the table, her heart still racing from the words of the people in the room. She had come here expecting answers, but all she had received was more uncertainty. Each face around the table was filled with conviction, a sense of purpose that made her feel like an outsider, like someone who had been thrust into a world she didn't belong in. The others were confident, ready for whatever was to come. She wasn't. She had never imagined she would be part of something like this, never imagined that her simple life, serving coffee, chatting with the regulars, would be replaced with something so enormous, so full of weight and expectation. The man who had brought her here spoke again, his voice calm but filled with authority. "You've made it this far, Emily. But the real work begins now. You've seen the truth. You felt the shift in the air. It's not just about you anymore. It's about everyone." His words felt heavy, almost suffocating. Emily swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. "I don't know if I can do this," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. The woman across from her gave her a kind, understanding smile. "None of us knew at the beginning," she said. "We all had doubts. But we did what needed to be done. And so will you." Emily felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly smothered by the weight of everything that had been said. "I've always been just me," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Just a waitress. I never asked for any of this." The man who had led her here nodded slowly. "None of us asked for it, Emily. But here we are, and here you are. The question is, what will you do with it? Will you step into this world, into your role, or will you walk away?" Emily's heart skipped a beat. Walk away? She had no idea what it even meant to walk away from something like this. It felt like stepping off a cliff with no ground beneath her, no safety net to catch her. But could she really stay in this world? A world that felt so far beyond her, a world full of power and secrets? "You're stronger than you know," the woman said, her voice soft but firm. "And you've already proven it. You're here, aren't you? You've already stepped into this. The world needs people like you. People who can make the hard choices, who can face what others can't." Emily's chest tightened. She didn't feel strong. She felt small, out of place, like she didn't belong. But, as she looked around the table, as she saw the faces of the people who had already walked this path, something inside her shifted. Maybe they were right. Maybe she did have something inside her she hadn't realized. Maybe the world really did need people like her. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision pressing on her chest. "What happens next?" she asked, her voice steadier now. The man stood up, his eyes locking with hers. "Now we prepare. The next phase begins. It's time for you to step into your role, to do what you were chosen for." Emily stood as well, her legs shaky but determined. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't turn back. Not now. Not after everything. The man led her toward the door, his steps confident and purposeful. "You'll learn more soon enough," he said as they walked. "But for now, trust yourself. Trust the path." Emily nodded, her mind still spinning, but something inside her had clicked. She wasn't sure what was coming, but she knew she had to face it. She had already stepped into this world, and now there was no turning back. She would walk this path, no matter where it led. Emily stood still, taking in the quiet intensity of the room. The weight of everything that had happened, everything she had just learned, seemed to press down on her like an unseen force. She had entered this world expecting answers, but now, standing here, surrounded by people who had already walked this path, she realized she had no idea what came next. The man who had led her here, the one with the calm yet commanding presence, turned to her, his expression serious. Now that you're here, Emily, it's time to start your training. The words struck her like a thunderclap. Training? She had no idea what that meant. She wasn't a fighter. She wasn't some secret agent. She was just Emily, the girl who had served coffee and talked to lonely strangers at a diner. Training for what? She asked, her voice shaky. The man smiled faintly, but his eyes remained focused, piercing. Training for what's coming. There are things you need to know, skills you'll need to master. We've been preparing for this for a long time, and now, it's your turn. Emily's stomach twisted with nerves. She had expected answers, but this was more than she could have imagined. She thought of the life she had left behind, the diner, the simplicity, the routine. It felt like a different lifetime now, and yet, she couldn't deny the pull she felt, the sense that this was where she was meant to be, even if she didn't fully understand why. I'm not sure I'm the right person for this, she admitted, her voice quieter now. I'm just a waitress. I don't know anything about whatever this is. The man looked at her, his gaze unwavering. You're more than that, Emily. You've always been more than that. You've already proven you have the heart for it. That's why you're here. But now, you'll need to build the skills to match. Emily glanced around the room at the others who were present. They all looked so confident, so sure of themselves. She felt out of place, like she was still trying to catch up. The woman who had spoken to her earlier, the one who had said they were all chosen, spoke again. We've all been where you are, she said, her tone gentle but firm. You won't be alone in this. We'll teach you what you need to know. But it's up to you to make the choice, to commit to this path, to the role you've been given. The role she'd been given. The words hung in the air, making her feel both small and enormous at the same time. She didn't know if she was ready for any of this, but she realized, as she stood there among these strangers, that there was no turning back. She had already stepped into this world, and the only way forward was through it. The man nodded, as if reading her thoughts. You don't have to have it all figured out yet. But you need to make the choice, Emily. You need to decide who you are in this world, what role you'll play. Are you ready? Emily looked around at the faces in the room, then back at the man. Her heart was pounding in her chest, her palms sweaty. She didn't know if she was ready. She didn't know what this path would lead to, but she knew one thing. She couldn't walk away. Not now. Not after everything. Yes, she said, her voice firm despite the doubt swirling inside her. I'm ready. The man smiled, a small, approving smile, and for the first time since she had entered the room, Emily felt a shift, a sense of purpose that she hadn't felt before. It was subtle, but it was there. She had made the decision. There was no going back now. Good, the man said, nodding. Now let's begin.